Now, before we get started, I'd like to tell you all about our speaker. This is pretty exciting to be partnering with Jim Stickley, but let me tell you a little bit about him. He has stolen credit cards, hacked social security numbers, robbed banks, yes, robbed banks, created fake ATMs, and he's broken into armed government facilities and stolen from teenagers. He's an identity theft, but he is no criminal. Fortunately for all victims involved, Jim is a cybersecurity expert with over 25 years in the industry who was hired to perform these attacks by corporations testing their security, news agents investigating security concerns, and other media outlets interested in knowing just how easy it is to commit identity theft. His job is to find security flaws before the real criminals find them and warn people and organizations about what they can do to protect themselves, which is why we've asked him to join us today. A little bit more information, he's also been a consultant for network stations, Fox News, CBS, and NBC, as well as the Associated Press. Jim has been featured in numerous magazines, newspapers, including Time Magazine, Business Week, Fortune Magazine, New York Times, PC Magazine, CSO Magazine. You are such a talented individual. I just have to tell everyone just how smart you are so they take the information you provide today seriously because it is so incredibly important. So without further ado, let me welcome Jim Stickley to our virtual webinar this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Really excited to have you here. And I just want to kick it off with a lot of organizations don't have a cybersecurity practice or they're just getting it started. Why do you think it's important in 2021 to address this issue?
Wow, that's I guess a good jumping off point. Yeah. At this point, I mean, it's just kind of read the news any day of the week. Somebody has a breach somewhere. I mean, it's everything is digital, everything is online now, and there's no one that's not a target anymore. It used to be people would assume I'm a large organization, I'll be under attack. I'm a small mom and pop business, I won't be under attack. And there is no boundaries anymore. There is no like, oh, these types of businesses are targeted and these ones aren't targeted. Now it's if you're online, you're a target because a lot of times it's automated attacks now. It's not always a human being just sitting there attacking a specific place. I mean, that obviously happens, but a lot of it's just automated shotgun approach where the code just goes out and blasts anything that's online. And so if you have employees and those employees are online and they're browsing on the internet or getting emails or having any kind of access where data can be sent or passed through them, they're at risk. And so that means that you do need a cyber program in place of some sort. And if you don't have one at this point, today might be the day you at least start thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Even like you might just have 3 employees and well, you go, okay, it's just 3 of us. It's no big deal. But if one of those 3 people has their computer compromised, then you got to start figuring out, okay, well, what risk is there really? Do you have customer data on those computers that person was compromised on, and what data could they have? Or if their computer was compromised, could they just use their email from that system to target their customers just through the mailing list and send out malware to them on behalf of your organization? So you have to start thinking like, while you might not be the biggest company on the planet, there's still risk involved, and you got to figure out what those risks are. And it could be primarily risk to you, or it could be risk to your own customers.
That's crazy. What are the top 3 things you suggest that companies should have as a part of their plan? If they don't have a plan at all and they're just getting started, it
Sure.
may seem like an untenable task. Yeah. So what are the top 3 things they should focus on to get started?
I guess the number one thing you're going to want to do a risk assessment, and that's something you can either do yourself or you can hire a company to do it, depending on how large you are. And basically, you need to evaluate, okay, what are the risks that we currently have? And every organization will be different because sometimes it's about customer data, personal information, confidential information like that. Other times it might be about data that you have. Could it be compromised? And it's maybe stuff that you have at patents that you're planning on filing, or proprietary information that you just don't want anybody else to have because they could rip you off or put you out of business, those types of things. So it's establishing those risks. What are they? And along with that is doing that vulnerability assessment as well. What systems do we have? Are they being kept up to date on patches, vulnerabilities, those types of things? So that would be kind of like step 1, is just figure out what are the biggest risks that are going on out there. Once you're dealing with that, then the next step is mitigation. It's figuring out, okay, how do we shore up. I mean, it's impossible to get rid of risk. I mean, there's just always going to be, if you're online or if you're doing business, you have inherent risk, even if it's things just like lawsuits from someone tripping, walking into your office or something. I mean, there's always risk involved. So it's figuring out, okay, well, what can we eliminate the risk on? And if we can eliminate risk, what have we done to prepare for those risks? So, obviously with someone tripping in your office, you have insurance, and that helps to mitigate that risk. And so with vulnerabilities, you hopefully are applying patches and have a program in place to apply patches to keep up on those, because that's one of the biggest areas where people fall down is they've got their desktops, they've got their computers, and then they patch some stuff, but other things they go, oh, we'll get to it later because they're busy and, day-to-day operations, that's not their top priority. And that's where they get into trouble. So it's having programs in place to address that stuff. And then I guess the last thing would be backups. It kind of falls outside of the scope of that, or maybe it's somewhere in the middle of it. But to me, it's just such an important thing right now due to ransomware that if you're not doing backups on any critical data on, minimum weekly basis, but really it should be a daily basis at this point, you're just kind of playing Russian roulette. Ransomware, you read about it every day. It spreads very, very rapidly. And once it's in your network, it can bring you down very, very quickly. And if you have backups of everything, it's really not that big of a deal. It's a nuisance for sure. You have to, clean everything up, wipe it out, restore the data, but at least you haven't lost anything. The organizations that are spending $50,000, $100,000, several $100,000, even $1 million or more, those are the organizations that didn't have backups. They didn't have the stuff somewhere where they could get it back. And if you lose your data and it's just gone, well, what do you do now? You pay the ransom. And so by having the backups available, it really reduces the risk that you have.
That's great. Thank you. One of the things we have at Ideal Credit Union, we have an expert IT team as well, and they train all of us at the credit union. So they're constantly telling us what it is, because the only way to protect ourselves from ourselves is to explain to us what it is we're doing.
Sure.
So I'm going to throw a bunch of things at you, and we've heard a lot about IP spoofing, email spoofing, MAC address spoofing, and can you tell us a little bit more about the DNS spoofing? And actually, for our members that perhaps haven't heard of spoofing, I feel like I've heard a lot about spoofing because of the classes that they've got us taken. Can you just explain spoofing and farming and phishing and all the other things they have to be aware of when putting this plan together?
Okay, wow, that's a very big question, or very broad. Let me start with spoofing. So spoofing, the term in general means that you're kind of pretending to be something you're not. And so we're like email spoofing. You receive an email, it looks like it comes from eBay, but it didn't come from eBay. It's a criminal spoofing eBay. So they make it look like it came from eBay, but it really came from somebody else. And there's a million different types of spoofing out there. Specifically DNS, the reason that one's kind of interesting is because it's one of these ones that goes under the radar. Most people aren't even aware it's going on right now, and yet criminals are having a field day with it. And basically what happens is criminals will go and they'll buy a domain name that is really close to a real domain name. So if I was going to target Google, maybe I would buy Google's domain name, but I'd have one letter off. And sometimes the one letter will be something that you might not notice. Like they might replace the L with an I, because when you look at lowercase, L and I look the same. So if you were to receive an email with a link and it said google.com and it had an I where the L was, you might not notice that until you click on the link. Another thing that they'll do is they'll buy a domain name where it's one character off on your keyboard. So again, if we were using Google, instead of typing Google, Google, maybe be Googler, because the R is right next to the E on your keyboard. And when you're typing fast, people fat finger all the time. And criminals realize, well, like all they have to do is start buying up these domain names that are one character off from the real ones on your keyboard, let them sit out there, make them look like the real organization, and people will just come to them. So it's kind of like, the spider just waiting with their little web out there for people to happen to trip into it. And they're having a ton of success with this. Our own studies, so we do studies all the time where we'll work with our clients and buy up domains that are similar to theirs, and then to start tracking how many of their customers went to these sites that would have been malicious had a criminal had them. And obviously for us, we just redirect them to the real sites. So the customer never knows the difference, but we just keep tabs on how many people would have hit. And it's astronomical. We get hundreds of hits in a matter of a week or two. And that's just from people literally just mistyping by one character. So the whole DNS or domain spoofing, it's really a problem that most people aren't thinking of. So on that one, like when you're browsing to the internet and you go to any website, if you're expecting one thing in your head, and when you get to the site, it does something different. One of the really common ones they're doing right now is trying to trick people into installing extensions. So they'll put up a website that's not exactly the site you're going to, so they can almost skate like the law on whether or not they're doing anything malicious, because you go to the site and it goes, oh, before you can access the site you're trying to access, you need to first install this security extension. And people just assume, oh, well, it must be something now that that company is doing to help keep me more secure. So they install these extensions that have nothing to do with that company, because again, they were one character off. So when you browse a site, if you ever come across something and it just seems like that's not what I was expecting, stop and look at the URL you just typed in and make sure you don't have that one character mistype. And even if you're at a site that looks just like the real site, always just pause a moment before you enter in login credentials, personal information, social security numbers, credit card information, and always just really make sure you typed in the exact URL you thought you were typing in, because that one character can just make all the difference in the world.
Wow. Do you see, I mean, when we talk about small businesses, and I think about everything you just shared with us, can the solo IT manager actually manage all these new threats? Or do you recommend outsourcing just to help them stay safe in this crazy world right now?
It's really hard. I mean, I'm a big fan of kind of that hybrid approach, and every organization is different, and it depends truly on what's going on in your organization and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to protect. Most of the time, having one guy try to do it all, it's almost impossible now, just because there's just so much, and no matter how good they are, there's only so many hours in the day. And so, they could be the craziest cybersecurity expert ever, but if they're trying to maintain an entire facility and doing all the security for everything, it's an impossible task for one person. So in those scenarios, outsourcing, and now, I mean, outsourcing is pretty common at some levels. Most of the time you're outsourcing things like firewall management, intrusion detection, a lot of the network maintenance of the security there. That gets outsourced, and it's getting less expensive too, especially for small shops. The pricing has come way down. It used to be only the large guys could even afford to outsource that stuff. And now they have programs set up specifically for the SMB space, where you're not paying a ton of money. It's a monthly fee, and they kind of maintain all of the lower hanging fruit. They give guidance. They're also available for support in case you're trying to, apply patches or do things. You can talk to them. So yeah, I would highly recommend, at least at some level, getting some help. Again, everybody's different, so it's impossible to say you absolutely need it. But I just know it's pretty rare. I mean, because even on the large organizations now, they're doing outsourcing. I mean, you can, we're talking multi-billion-dollar industries outsource a lot of their stuff, because they've realized no matter how good their team is internal, there's just so much going on. And you look at all the different things that are available to you now. I mean, you're outsourcing everything else, and most of the time you're outsourcing your mail now, your web services now, like all these other things. So it just makes sense to look at, okay, well, what else can you do in a smart and secure way? And again, it's not everything. I would always have an IT security guy or staff in my facility. You don't want to outsource it completely, because you need somebody internal to help educate your own staff, to be aware of what's going on, to communicate with management. So I don't like outsourcing everything, but I think there is a hybrid there.
Excellent. Kind of a segue. This is a question from one of our listeners. What are the top 5 things businesses are doing wrong today in managing IT security?
All right. I guess in no particular order, I'm just going to fire these off the top of my head here. Let's see. Probably a big one is poor education and awareness. So many organizations do almost nothing for cybersecurity education and awareness. And when I say education and awareness, that's actually kind of 2 things in one. Education is education. It's, hey, here's what phishing is, here's what spoofing is, here's what all these different things are. Here's basically what we're doing right now is education, I guess. And sometimes you'll have tests, and sometimes they'll do like phishing tests and those types of things. That's all education. Awareness is keeping your employees aware on a daily basis of, here's what's happening right now. In our industry, obviously, it changes every day. Every day there's new threats, there's new risks, there's new types of malware, there's new things spreading so quickly that if you're not keeping your employees aware of what's happening right now, they fall behind very quickly. And I kind of, equate it to my parents. My parents are smart, but they're not super tech savvy. And if I don't keep them up to date on everything, they're constantly like falling victim to things. If someone will call and scam them on a call or something like that. So I'm constantly trying to push information to them of, here's what's happening. If you get this call, if this happens, don't click on this link, because the more you know, the less likely you are to fall victim. So I guess that'd be my number one thing right at the top. don't be reliant on technology. For example, a lot of businesses think, okay, well, we implemented antivirus on all of our desktops. So the employees just go, okay, well, we're cool now. We can just browse everywhere, click everything because we've got antivirus. It'll stop whatever's going to attack us. And that just doesn't work. Antivirus is kind of like putting locks on your doors. Like your house can still be robbed. You know, if you leave the garage door open, someone can still come in and take everything out of your garage, even if you lock the front door. It doesn't guarantee anything, or you can smash a window. So don't just assume because you've implemented some security that now you've got this false sense of security, because it doesn't really work. Another one that's probably to really be important would be educating your customers on your communication with them. So many times organizations, have communication with their customers. Well, then a phishing scam comes out pretending to be that organization and goes out to their customers, and their customers start falling victim to it. And then they're mad at the organization, even though the organization had nothing to do with the phishing scam. It's just association by name. So now you're bad. Communicate with what types of things you'll ever ask them for in emails, what types of things you'd ever ask them for on the phone. The more you tell them what to expect from your organization, then they're prepared if something outside of that happens to them. If they all of a sudden get this email saying, give us all your personal information, they're going to go, that's not what they normally tell us they would ever do. And you always have that line that they can call. Here's the number to call if you're ever getting something weird, if you're ever suspicious, please call us at this number at any time, whatever, and we'll work with you. So it's that communication there. Another one, I don't even know what number on that now. I'm just kind of randomly running up here. Don't assume you're too big. I talked about it before, but if you assume you're too small, like no one's going to attack you, that's a really big mistake a lot of organizations make. I mean, so many times I've worked with organizations after the fact that just went, we just never thought anybody would even know we existed, let alone target us. And again, if you're being targeted, I mean, even when criminals do personally target, they have no idea how big or small you are oftentimes, because they're in another country. They're somewhere on the other side of the globe, and all they have is a digital marker of your website, and that's all they know about you. And if you've done a good job at making you look like a cool company, you might look like you're huge to them, even though you have only 4 or 5 people. So don't just assume because you're small, you're not going to be targeting. And then the last one I already mentioned would probably be backups. I think that's 5. So make sure you back up. I mean, that's the thing that most people make the mistake on that they regret later. And again, that always comes back to ransomware. If you haven't kept up with your backups, you will regret it at some point.
All right. Well, having been in this field for quite some time, can you tell us what you see as the biggest threats that criminals are using to gain intellectual property and personal information?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of big ones right now. Obviously, everybody knows what phishing is. At least I hope everybody knows what phishing is at this point. But phishing is basically where you get emails, they pretend to be somebody that they're not to gain information. Phishing is still the #1 way. I think it's like 90-something% right now of all breaches start with phishing. And by all breaches, I mean it could be anything from getting ransomware on your computer to getting malware that allowed them into your computer that gain access to other things. And I guess right now the big exception is the Exchange servers is maybe going to skew that number a little, because right now you're running your own Exchange server and you haven't done all the patches and done all the review to make sure you haven't been breached yet. That should be like, I would even stop watching right now. I would just go get on your Exchange server immediately, because you're in a lot of trouble. Exchange is an absolute mess right now. But beyond Exchange, in general, it's phishing will be your biggest risk. I mean, not even close to anything else. And then the next thing that's really a hot topic right now is probably web browser extensions. And just because that's one of these ones that people aren't aware of just how dangerous they are. And web browser extensions, just in general, are little programs you can put into your web browser. So you've got Chrome, or you've got Edge, you've got Firefox, whatever you have the ability to go to their little site. So you can go to like Chrome Store and download these little programs that run inside of your web browser. And there's lots of utility programs and cool things that they can do. The problem is that criminals have realized this is a really easy way to gain access to your computer, and there's a ton of loopholes in it. And so if I can get you to install one of my extensions on your computer, they can give me the ability to monitor everything you're doing. Because from then on, any web browsing you do, even if it goes to a secured site, so you go, oh, I see a little HTTPS, therefore it's encrypted traffic, I feel really secure about my communication. any extension that's running right now in your browser can literally watch the entire communication stream, plain text, and record every bit of it and send it anywhere in the world. So it's crazy. And it can do injections. It can modify what you're doing. I have an entire demo just on showing a bank account where a person thinks they're logging into the account, but the actual extension gets in between, captures their login, logs in for somebody else, and then tells the person, like, spins them somewhere else while the real person's on their account doing whatever they want. So extensions are really dangerous. If you're not sure if you have extensions, and a lot of times you'll have them and don't even realize it, there's the little dots on the top right of whatever web browser you're using, like Chrome or Edge or Firefox. You go into your settings button and then just scroll down, and you'll either be under more tools and then extensions, or just under extensions. And just look at the extensions you have. And if you don't know what they are, just click the little disable button. You don't have to delete them right away, but just disable all of them, and then see if you notice that you're not using them. And if you don't notice that you're not using them ever and they have no impact, don't ever re-enable them again. That's the best thing, because a lot of people just don't know they even have them. So I would say that's a huge threat that most people aren't aware is there.
As a business owner, I've been at the credit union for 11 years. Prior to the credit union, I worked for a community bank, and we had a client who had key logging. A key logger jumped on, got their information, and they literally wired out, I think they lost $40,000. And it was heartbreaking because they're a small business, and that was a lot of money for them at the time. How, as small business owners, can they protect themselves from things of that nature? You made me think about it when you talked about the extension. It sounds like something similar that can happen. How do they protect themselves and their bank account information?
See, this is so hard. So yeah, because there is no like, hey, if you just install this, you don't have to worry anymore. Like it's not ever that simple, but that's a great keyboard loggers. And it's similar. These extensions do keyboard logging as well. They're so maniacal because they put almost no footprint on your computer. They don't put any latency on your computer. They just sit there and just passively watch everything you type and then ship that data out to somebody. And again, you're typing logins, you're typing passwords. So to me, one thing you can do is when you're doing business work, instead of using your standard like PC, get a Chromebook. And I don't have any stock in Google or anything, but Chromebooks are really close to bulletproof. They are extremely secure. And for things like online banking, they're fantastic. I mean, the risk is just really, really low. So if you're using something like that, the odds of it being compromised are really low. Now, where you have risk on that is if you start installing lots of apps, just like extensions, apps have vulnerabilities and can do all sorts of stuff. But if you just have a Chromebook that you set up and you said, okay, we're going to use this for all of our wire transfer, banking, payroll, all the things that we do online that need to be really secure. We've got this dedicated Chromebook set up. They're not expensive. They're a couple $100, and it's the best security you'll ever buy because you just have such a low amount of risk with those types of devices. So rather than trying to figure out how am I going to make this PC that's this bloated thing that has so much stuff that can go wrong on it, trying to make that secure, just kind of give up the ghost on that one and just get a separate computer. And in this case, I like that. Not another computer. I would go like a Chromebook or something because they're just really secure. They hold up really, really well.
That is great advice. I want to take your bloated PC one step farther. We had another listener with the question, and they said, what are the best ways to provide a high level of security without compromising user performance? They were stating that a lot of times the more security that's on there, the slower the performance and the frustration from the front line.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest downsides to antivirus in general is it does really, really hit performance. And there's some that are better than others. Again, this is another one of those ones that it's not easy because the more technology you put on to secure up your computer, the more secure your computer will be. The downside, the more stuff you stick on, the slower it gets. And so it's kind of like, the more jackets I put on, I'll be warmer, but I can't move around and do my job. It's hard. I don't have a great answer other than it comes back to awareness then, and it's user choice. It's going to come down to the person keeping the security going as opposed to the technology. Because you can put like Malwarebytes, that doesn't do too bad on your computer, but Malwarebytes only works in conjunction with an antivirus. So now you just put another layer on top of what already is there. On the other hand, if you can avoid clicking links, opening attachments, randomly browsing the sites, keeping up with every patch that you need to have on your desktop. Just those things can reduce your risk drastically. I mean, a ton. But it's hard. It's really, really hard, especially when you're doing day-to-day business where you have customers sending you emails with attachments or with links, with things that they need you to look at. Every time they send you a document, you're opening yourself up to risk. Those documents can have malware. And a lot of times it could be your customer was compromised and they don't even know they're sending you viruses with the document. So they send you a Word doc saying, can you take a look at this, or an Excel sheet because it's got, information in there for business. You open it up and it's the data that you were expecting, only malware has been embedded in there through the malware on their computer. They didn't know it, you don't know it, and now you're compromised. So it's extremely difficult to try to manage this stuff and without having this technology stuck on it. The upside is, depending on your budget, the newer computers out there handle it pretty well. Computers are getting really fast now. And so in the last year or two, most of those computers can handle any antivirus out there at full speed without any real major hits. If you've got one that's a few years or older, it can get dragged down really, really fast.
Thank you. That's great advice. I've got another question. In thinking about things that happened in 2020 and continuing into 2021, we've heard a lot about businesses just struggling to stay in business. And this goes to the IT staff. Sometimes budgets or businesses make difficult decisions about cutting costs. What is the risk of cutting the cost or helping IT professionals state this is a cost you cannot cut, even with the fact our business is struggling? Help them help their business.
So this kind of comes back to that whole risk assessment stuff we talked about at the beginning. So there's a ton of great technology. There's a ton of great tools. There's a ton of things out there that cost a lot of money. And, if you could implement it all, it'd be fantastic. You'd do really, really well, but you can't. So then you got to look and go, okay, well, what are the risks that we have? And based on the risks that we have, what mitigation can we do? And what's it going to cost? And a lot of times you're going to find that some of your biggest risks that you have, the actual resolution for those is very little money. It doesn't always have to be expensive technology. Sometimes it's simple as putting in a firewall or some control access rules to lock up certain things. And that's already reduced, a huge percent of your risk. Or for example, if you have employees that don't need business email. So let's say that your company, there's only 2 or 3 people that actually use email for communicating with customers, and everybody else is internal. Well, you can set up your mail server so that it's just an intranet where email can only circulate internally between those people, so they don't have the risk of receiving phishing attacks and everything from the outside in. So it's not going to cost money, or it's not going to cost much, just some configurations, and you've reduced your risk a ton. So it doesn't always have to be big budget. On the other hand, you do want to make sure that you're looking at things and go, okay, well, we clearly don't want to eliminate. We had a patch management company and they were maintaining all our patches, but they were expensive, so we're just going to do it ourselves. And instead of doing it every day, we'll do it once a month. That's not your best decision. That would probably be more risky. So it's kind of trying to walk that fine line and balance. And again, every organization is different, but most of the time you don't have to spend a ton. And this is one of those ones where I've worked a lot of boards, because obviously the IT guy is going to lay out the best plan that he can lay out or she can lay out, because they want to make sure that this plan is, bulletproof, and that's their job. And then it's the board and if you don't have a board, it's, the other managers to sit down and go, okay, well, that's best case scenario. Now let's get to, here's budget, here's best case. How do we meet in the middle? And it's kind of doing that fine tuning of, okay, well, this would be great, but it's only going to actually help us by about 5%. Maybe we can hold off on that as opposed to this one over here, which would give us a 30%, more secure. Let's go with that one first. And so it's kind of, again, walking that tightrope of figuring out what's going to be best for your organization.
Great information. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about social engineering, and are the social engineering attacks gaining more steam?
Sure. Well, I mean, even, phishing. So social engineering is similar to spoofing, if you will. And social engineering is, again, pretending to be are using information to gain more information. So I maybe stole some information off the dark web that gave me some information about a person or about an organization, or that I now know they use a certain bank or credit union, or I have, some personal information about them. I then call them up pretending to be that organization that I know they work with, to try to gain more information, and then I use that information to gain more, and that's social engineering. And you can do it with things as simple as phishing. You can do it with phone calls, lots of spoofing with phone calls and that type of thing. Or you can even do physical, where you code down. I mean, I've robbed a lot of places by physically going there, pretending to be some organization that they either do business with or that I thought they would trust, gaining access to the facility and stealing what I need to steal. So social engineering is very popular. It's not going to go anytime soon. It just morphs. It just continually changes. It used to be, phishing was kind of the end all be all. Right now, we've seen a huge uptick in the phone call attacks. So where people literally will get a phone call or a voicemail left to them saying there's a problem with an account, a problem with something, they're going to be sued by the IRS, there's a warrant out for their arrest, like all these crazy things. But because it comes on the phone, people think, oh, well, this is real. It's not an email. Emails I know are fake. Phone call, that feels very real. An 800 number I'm supposed to call back. They call the 800 number. It sounds real. And they give up their personal information that way. And it's all just social engineering. And it all just comes down to, my philosophy is I trust nothing at this point. I believe nobody. If I figure if the IRS is calling me to tell me they're going to arrest me, something's weird. Like they're not doing that. They're not going to. I mean, no one. I don't think I've ever seen in any movie where the feds called me up and told me they were going to issue a warrant for my arrest over the phone. I don't think that happens that way. I'm pretty sure they would just kick my door in or something. So when in doubt, you can just look it up online and find the real phone numbers for whatever organization's pretending to be calling you. Never just immediately give up information. If somebody calls pretending or saying they're with an organization, just go, great, I'm going to call you back. And if they say, oh, you can't, and say, okay, bye, just hang up, because that's never going to work. And if they say, okay, call back, don't call the number they say, look up the real number for the organization, call that number, get the switchboard and say, here, I got a call from somebody claiming this. And they'll either say, yeah, that's legitimate and transfer you, or they'll say, yeah, that was a scam.
We have a listener who had a question, excuse me. Sorry. Do you have any advice to help them verify callers without offending the caller?
Every organization is different. So obviously in a credit union, you guys have, very specific controls in place on how you have to do it. And I think at this point in time, most people understand you're not doing this to be mean to them or to make their lives difficult. And if you explain that from the very beginning, hey, for your security, we need to verify that you are who you are. And if they start to get mad, just look, like, you have to understand, if you're not you, if somebody was calling right now pretending to be you, would you really want us to just give them full access to all of your stuff? And once you gently help people understand why you're doing it, they go, oh yeah, that makes sense. So you just kind of want to work with them and help them understand. And again, it depends on what data you have on them to know what information you can ask. I'm always a big fan of dynamic information. And what I mean by that is, in the old days, it would be mother's maiden name. That was like the go-to. Hey, what's your mother's maiden name? And then they would get that. But now, I mean, criminals can get that off the dark web really fast. So it now is dynamic stuff. So instead, ask them, like, it depends on, again, your business. If you're a woodworking company or something, and you can say, hey, what was the last woodworking thing you bought from us? Or, ask them something that the only person that would generally know that would be somebody that had done business with you. With financial institutions, a lot of times now they'll ask them, like, what was a recent purchase you made? Or, what did in the last week, name a store you went to, or something like that, because they have all that information in front of them that the criminal won't have in front of them, to help narrow stuff down. So it comes down to just trying to figure out, what can you ask them that's related to the business you're in to help narrow it down. And again, most people understand now. And if they don't, you just got to kind of help them understand you're just doing it for their benefit.
Great advice. Well, you mentioned the dark web, and I know we can go down a wormhole on the dark web. It's so fascinating to me when I hear these stories. But could you share some information on the dark web? It's real. It's crazy. I've seen a demo.
Yeah.
Help us, Jim. Help us.
Sure. So the dark web is really cool. And what's funny is the dark web's not illegal. Everybody just assumes the dark web means it's bad. It's run by some sort of criminal somewhere. The dark web was originally designed just to help people remain anonymous. So if, like, you were in some country where they had some oppressive regime, you could get information out. Or if you worked for a corporation and you wanted to be a whistleblower, this was a way you could release information without it tying back to you. So it had good intentions, and it still has good intentions. The problem is that criminals realize I can be anonymous, so therefore I can do whatever I want anonymously. So they started setting up shop. So now you can go on the dark web, and anybody, if you, there's a thing called Tor, T-O-R, and it's Tor web browser. It's free and it's legitimate. It's a real thing. It's not bad. It's not dangerous. The Tor web browser allows you to browse on the dark web, and it's not like you can go to Google and just do a search on Tor. You have to know where you want to go. But on Google, it has a whole list that you can find all sorts of sites to check out on the dark web. Once you're on the dark web, then you can go to these websites, and literally it's like going to Amazon. You can go to a site, and at that site, you can select what you're in the mood for. Oh, I want to buy illicit drugs. You click here, and there's a whole list of illicit drugs. Or, oh, I want to buy stolen personal information. You click here, and it's literally a shopping cart and everything. So you can go, okay, I want to buy social security numbers. You go here, and there's reviews. So the criminals actually have reviews on their site from other criminals that have bought from them on like, oh, these are really good social security numbers, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's almost funny if it wasn't so scary how easy it is. But that's it. It's so easy now. So now a criminal, like let's say I'm a hack. So me, in general, like I'm okay at hacking. I can break into stuff. So I hack in. I steal a database from some organization. Well, now I have this database, and maybe it has 100,000 records with social security numbers and all this stuff. Well, I'm not an identity thief. That's not what I want to do. So I go, okay, well, this is kind of useless to me. But I go on the dark web, put it up for sale. Say I've got 100,000 records for sale to the highest bidder, and I can put it as an auction, or I can put a price on it. Say I want, 1 Bitcoin or 2 Bitcoin, depending on how much I think it's worth, and that would equate to $60,000 or $120,000. And somebody will come along and go, okay, that'd be useful to me because I am an identity thief. Or they may be somebody else who goes, I'll buy that big chunk, and then I'm going to resell it in smaller chunks. And then they get smaller, smaller until someone actually uses the data. And it's a whole ecosystem out there designed just for stolen information. So it's made it so that the average criminal who maybe wouldn't, in the old days, it would have been pointless for them to steal the data because they couldn't do anything with it. Now they have the exact plan of I'm going to steal this here, and they could be anywhere in the world. So again, I could be in a third world country where if I made $100 in a year, I'd be killing it. Or I can make $100,000 in a day by stealing data from somebody in the United States. It's a no-brainer for them. I mean, it's good business. It's a good business model. And unfortunately for us, it means it's not going away anytime soon.
No, I saw a demonstration on the dark web, and they picked a city and a zip code and a particular business, and it was very interesting to go in there and see what was available. And I was amazed at the shopping cart, and I swear there was a 1-800 number if I had questions. And I'm like, really? Is it that easy to steal data? But he showed us how to steal it, how to use it, and you can see that the identity theft, the thieves are a lot more savvy than they were before. They used to walk into the credit union with a gun. Now they just buy your information and they steal it, and you don't even realize the dollars are gone.
Yeah, the gun idea, that's so like 1990s now. Yeah.
So it is safer to get robbed, I guess, but yes, not good, not good at all. Well, another thing we saw a lot of in 2020 was people working from home. And I think as employees went home, it presented a whole new set of challenges for business owners. How do we provide them with access? How do we keep our information safe? Can you tell us a little bit about some of the questions that people have asked you specific to work from home and security scenarios?
Sure. Obviously, by now, most organizations have figured it out, at least mostly. I mean, in the beginning, it was just like, oh my gosh, it was a complete mess. Now, obviously, if you have people working from home, they've got to have some level of encryption between their network and your business network, and that's generally done through a VPN. Or now, a lot of people are moving to zero. And basically, it's allowing them to have this security so that while they're connected to the network, they're secure. The problem is that there's still so much risk out there, because when you're at work and you're on your computer, generally the IT staff is responsible for keeping that computer secure. And it's inside a secured building, it's on a secured network, it's a secured computer. You've got all these layers of security, and so you feel pretty good. When you're at home, a lot of times you have your laptop, you're now in an insecure building, it's just your house. You're on an insecure network, that same network that you're plugged into. Your kids are probably on playing video games, and you got everybody else doing chaos on there. So it's an extremely insecure network. And then you're trying to communicate from that network through this VPN into the corporate network. that's a conduit, if you will, so that now anybody that's on your local network or on your PC has a potential to get from your PC into that corporate network as well. So there's a lot of risk there. And that's just on the actual like networking side. Another thing that people forget about completely is the actual physical side. So when you're at work, if you print out a document, when you're done with it, you either throw it in your shred bin or you have your shredder, you have a shred desk, box somewhere, and it gets destroyed. At home, you print it out. Most people go, oh, recycle, and they throw it in recycle, but it's got confidential, private information on there, and they completely forget about it because it's just not a big deal. But criminals have realized this, and so they're targeting recycling centers. They're targeting places just for paper, looking for that data that's been left on these things. So it's these new risks that people didn't even think were out there are suddenly there. Obviously, things you can do. First of all, if you have employees working from home and they're going to be in a situation where they are printing stuff, spend $20 on a shredder, tell them to put it at their desk and make sure, everything they print, everything they ever do, they shred. It's, again, cheap security, but it makes a huge difference. As far as security on the machines themselves, make sure that you have controls in place. One of the things that a lot of VPNs support, but not everybody enables, is while the VPN is active, the computer itself has no communication capabilities on the local network. So if a criminal was hacked in through my network at my home into my machine, and then my machine has a VPN tunnel to work, as soon as the VPN tunnel opens up to work, it drops any other communication between my computer and my network. So if that criminal was on, they're no longer on, they're dropped. That's much better technology, and that's a much better design because hopefully you're limiting the amount of exposure you have there. Hopefully your IT department is the ones who's supplying them their computer. If you're just letting anybody use their own random home computer, again, you have huge risk because you're not responsible for the security of that device. And again, that thing's been compromised. You don't know what damage it could be doing. You could have malware that's going to spread through the VPN onto your network. So having more control over that computer so you can remotely install the patches and keep it up to date, really, really important. And then, as I touched on, the zero trust. And zero trust is a much bigger technology than just VPNs. But when it comes to the VPNs themselves, zero trust means that by default, whatever is going through that VPN on the other side is not trusted on any level, meaning it can't touch a single thing on the other side at all. And then you put in controls and say, okay, this machine is going to only ever go to this device, and they go to these specific services and nothing else. And by putting granular control at that level, it also really reduces the risk for organizations because now, if this PC gets compromised, even if it can only attack a couple things. And if those things are secure on the other side, it's done. It can't do anything at all. On the other hand, if it just has wide open access on that other network, well, now this thing can just sit there banging away and try to find vulnerabilities that might be out there that you just missed. So that helps a lot.
One of the other things we've seen are some people have gone, as you said, a year ago, we all went home and we kind of taped together what our work from home approach was. Now we've seen some greater productivity from some employees that are working at home and they're going to stay at home.
Sure.
Where do you see the future of identity access management and then continuing to control that access from outside sources?
Well, I mean, this is going to come down to, like, for example, drive sharing and such, because you want to make sure. So when I'm working from home, I've got my PC. When you're at the office, a lot of times your networks were set up where you might have a local drive on your computer, but most of the stuff you were saving and most of the stuff you were doing was saved on some central drive somewhere else. When you're at home, a lot of times when they set those VPNs up, they don't set up that part of the network. They just have it so that you can get in, so you can access web and mail and some other things, but they haven't gotten to the drive level. And that's where you kind of need to be because you still need to have controls over those drives. The problem that you run into, though, is now this machine's at home and it's sitting in someone's insecure house, but it has this tunnel to this particular drive, and that hard drive might have tons of confidential data on it, which means if a criminals happen to get in the house and is on that machine, they have access. So then you have to get into controls on the desktop itself, making sure, okay, when they're away, first of all, you have to have strict policies that they have to turn the computer off, lock it, all those things. You need to make sure that they have encryption on the drive. So when it's turned on, if someone steals the drive, they can't get back into it because the drive itself is encrypted. There's a lot of levels, I guess, when it comes to any kind of identity protection, any kind of information protection. And it's way beyond our call in just, 2 minutes. but it's something that every organization should be looking at is, okay, if we're going to do this, the person at home, what data do they touch? And is there any PIR, personally identifiable information or confidential information that they're accessing? And if the answer is yes, how are you going to ensure that that data can remain secure while they're at home? And that's going to come down to policy. It's going to come down to some sort of controls. It's going to come down to some software and technology. It's a number of different layers you're going to have to do to get it right. And you should make sure you do, because working from home, I mean, I've worked from home for over 20 years. I was the leader of this band. I love working from home. I'm far more productive. I'm not an office guy. I find offices to be very distracting. I mean, I think a lot of programmers, a lot of developers are the same way. Like, you want to be in your little cube. Like, I can sit in a cave forever and be super happy. You don't want to have people constantly bug you. So I can see how a lot of people are going to see a ton of productivity with this. And it's just making sure, if you do it, that you've looked at where are risks and how are we going to mitigate those so we don't have to worry.
All right, and one more work from home question. For companies that are using a VPN or encrypting their wide area network traffic, does that eliminate the need for malware? I know we've talked about malware. Does that eliminate the need for malware?
I mean, does it eliminate like getting malware on your computers? No, not at all. In fact, it opens up all sorts of new avenues. So, malware can get on your computer through so many different ways. Now, it can get on through your mobile device. If your mobile device is on your network at home, your mobile device can actually have apps that are malicious that attack PCs. I wrote one a while ago that I demonstrated that literally I could take a phone, turn it on, and have it on my home network. It would attack my PC if it had a vulnerability, install malware on there, and then that PC would no longer even care about the phone anymore. It would call home to me, and now I would have remote control of that PC, all because the phone just happened to be on the same network as the PC. So that's just one way. USB devices plugged in. If that USB device was in somebody else's computer and got malware, you can get it that way. You can get it through emails, obviously, and through web browsing and attachments. There's so many ways. Well, once malware is on your computer, then you have to worry about, okay, it sits there, and most of the time, most malware is designed to spread. That's its whole purpose. It's a virus. It wants to spread out to anything else it can. So if a virus is trying to spread out and you suddenly have a VPN tunnel between your desktop and the corporate network, it's going to try to use that tunnel to see where else it can spread. And that comes back again to the controls in place. So to me, a VPN only gives you a secure link to the network, but it doesn't it adds more risk, not less, in the whole grand scheme of things. Because while you're securely connected over there, you're still remote, and that remote connection over there is now the new threat, and it has its new way of bringing in more bad stuff to your network.
All right, well, I'm going to switch topics from VPN just to talk a little bit about, as we close up our call here, proactive technologies that organizations can leverage to detect threats and provide immediate and relevant info in case of a breach. I hate that breach word, but it is very important to talk about this.
So, I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there. I don't know if I want to start trying to name off any specific. I guess the best solutions are the ones that are managed, managed IPS, managed firewalls, because when you try to do it yourself, if you're trying to monitor, like, let's say you put up a SIM and you're trying to like monitor what's happening on your network, the odds of you having the time to really spend to manually do it yourself, it's just not realistic anymore. I mean, there's so much traffic that happens on even the smallest networks, and trying to then fine tune and like tune those screws to get them just right to know which is just gibberish you don't care about and which is actual attacks and bad stuff happening on your network. I mean, it's a full-time job. And I mean, there's companies, tons of companies that spend every waking hour just trying to figure this out for their customers. And even they struggle with it. And that's all they do. So if you're the IT guy and you're trying to maintain your entire network, implement patches, implement new technologies, roll out desktops to people that have them, set up VPNs for everybody working from home, doing all the rest of your tasks, the odds of you also being able to manage what's happening on your network at that particular moment and being aware and then being able to respond, I just don't think it's feasible anymore. I think that's an outsourced thing every single time. And again, there's a lot of companies that do it, and there's a lot of companies that do it at very different price ranges. Don't just assume because it's less expensive, it means it's garbage. There's companies that charge a ton of money that, focus on the biggest companies out there. And then there's kind of the middle ones. And then there's some companies that are very inexpensive, but do a really, really good job. And they're inexpensive because it's basically they've got their system set up, designed for a specific market space, and they're very good at it. So don't just assume you have to pay top dollar or else you're getting garbage security. Just look at reviews, talk to their customers, see what other people are saying about these organizations that you're looking at.
All right, and I think this is a tag-along question from one of our listeners. They wanted to know, do you recommend any incident response models? Breach happens for small to medium-sized businesses.
Sure. I mean, probably the most famous or the best known one would probably be NIST, N-I-S-T. And you could literally type NIST, N-I-S-T, and then type incident response models into Google all together. So NIST, N-I-S-T, incident response models, hit enter. It's got to be, don't look at the ads, but right after the ads, the very first or second thing that comes up will probably be from NIST, and it'll be their exact one. It's free. You don't have to use all of it because obviously they're geared towards government and everything else, but it's a really, really good guide that you can then kind of pick and choose what you want for you. I think it'll come to you in like a PDF form, modify, change it up however you need for your organization, but it's a really good start. And again, some of it's a little bit technical, mumbo jumbo that, small mom and pop probably aren't going to care about, but there's enough good information in there that it can help really get you going in the right direction.
All right, thank you. My final question is just kind of a recap. We started with the importance of cyber risk programs. How do we get started? What do we do if budgeting is bad? What don't we cut out of our budget? But for everyone thinking about, I need to get started, I need to pay more attention to this, I always like to give some good takeaways. So what are some good free resources that organizations can leverage to start their cyber risk programs?
Well, as I mentioned, NIST is a really good place to start. So I would start there. I mean, literally, if you just type in, cybersecurity into Google, there's so many places because so many, even organizations that are out there trying to make money. Everybody will give away a lot of just good information just because it's kind of the nature of the beast with cybersecurity. I mean, obviously everybody wants to make money, but there's also this kind of community feel where everybody wants to feel like they're working together because the reality is there's a lot of money to go around. And so with that in mind, nobody feels like if I give this away for free, I'm not going to make money. So if you literally just do your own search, you're going to find so much information. But with that said, I mean, start with the whole thing of, I want to start with doing a risk assessment. There's a lot of great structure out there on how to do risk assessments for free, how to do mitigation, what are the things that you should apply once you've done a risk assessment. Again, tons of information. You can just literally search for these things on Google and you're going to find so much stuff. And if you start with that, obviously, I mean, well, I'm biased, obviously you want to do the education side of things, visit your site, for example. You guys have great information on your site for cybersecurity education. I mean, that's important stuff. I talked before about the education and awareness. Being awareness is so important. You guys are tied into that yourselves. I mean, literally you can go to your site and learn about cybersecurity awareness on a daily basis. You're going to know so much more. Just having your finger on that pulse changes everything because now you're like, oh, this is happening right now. Oh, I see this is going on. And just that little nugget helps you start thinking in new ways because then you go, oh, this new thing is happening. And then you go back and you talk to your IT and you go, okay, would this happen to us? How would we deal with this if this does happen? And it gets you thinking outside of your normal day to day. Because again, if you're a woodworking shop, you're not thinking about cybersecurity on a daily basis. You're thinking about woodworking. And so this helps keep reminding you this is also going on. And because you're in a world now where everything's digital, you've got to kind of keep your finger on that pulse as well. And that'll make a big difference.
All right. And for our listeners, we have partnered with Stickley on Security with Jim's company, and this will be ongoing. We have a cybersecurity news feed, and we also have a weekly email that you can sign up for. Very good information. And one of the things that Jim and I have talked about when preparing for today was how rapidly things are changing. I, for example, am pretty sure the IRS is coming to arrest me at some point today because I got that phone call yesterday. And also, you just never know when they're going to arrest me for something else I didn't do. I get messages on my phone all the time. So it is crazy out there, but there's some legitimate things that are going on and we want to protect you. So as I close up today, Jim, I want to thank you for this information. It was really exciting to partner with you. And this is not a one-time thing. This is our first annual cybersecurity month. But we also plan to bring Jim back in the fall because things are changing so rapidly. I'd love to say that we won't have anything new to share, but unfortunately, I know that we will. And we want to protect you. We want to help you protect your business. And that is part of why we created our Cyber Awareness Month, but also why we partnered with our expert, Jim Stickley, because he has so much information to share to help you, as he said, you run your business and he'll help you keep it safe. So thank you for today. Thank you for all this information, and thank you to everyone that attended. Have a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you in a couple months with some new information. Bye-bye, everyone.